Hey, I'm ZSH Plays. Welcome back to San Bernardino Zoo, where today we'll be building a habitat for the gorgeous Arctic fox and finally getting an update on San Bernardino Zoo's monorail system. We'll be building for the Arctic foxes here in this cute little spot in the frozen north, just next to Cougar Crossing, the moose habitat, and the Wolfwood. Let's go! The main inspiration for this habitat, believe it or not, is one particular animation that I really want to see. So recently I made a video where I reviewed all the Planet Zoo DLCs, and as part of making that video I watched every trailer that Frontier released for each different pack so I could edit into the video. And what I saw in the trailer for the North America pack was the Arctic fox doing that cute thing they do where they dive headfirst into a pile of snow, normally when they're hunting small rodents that are under the snow. And I realized I've never seen that animation in the game. The reason for it is because they only perform that animation if you've got genuine snow in the habitat. And the only build I've done for Arctic foxes was in Tekton Zoo, and it had a roof on it, so there was no snow in the habitat. Now, seeing as this zoo is in Southern California, snow is going to be in pretty short supply, so I've been trying to work out how I could pull that off. And after doing some research, I found out that in, I believe it's Zoo Leipzig, in their polar bear habitat, the keepers will actually bring in fake snow for the polar bears to play in. They make it using almost like an ice machine. I thought it'd be fun in this habitat to design it so it looks like the keepers bring in a little pile of fake snow for the Arctic foxes to play in. And then we can have a little area where they can do their diving into the snow animation. We'll build that in a minute, but first we need to get the basics of the habitat done. So I'm building some rock walls to go around this little area here. This little corner is going to be one of those habitats for smaller animals that zoos like to use to fill up the spaces and the corners in the zoos. I love little habitats like that, and we really don't have very many of them in San Bernardino Zoo. We like big habitats here, so I thought it'd be fun to build a little one like this. And the Arctic fox is one of the few animals in the game that really don't need a lot of space, which is so unusual in franchise mode. Can't pass this opportunity up. So we're going to do what we've been doing recently, which is using primarily the faux rocks and then mixing in a few of the natural rocks as well to get a more interesting texture. I've built this one block of rocks here, and I'm trying to keep that ridge at the top that one of the rocks has in it all the way along, so it looks like there is a ridge at the top of the whole rock face. I think that's going to look really good. So I'm just adjusting that particular rock and making sure that it forms a nice line all the way down the walls so that the whole thing feels like one continuous rock face. Then we'll mix those other rocks in like I said. We'll just put one or two of these in, nothing too drastic, and then we'll curve the rock wall round to fill up the back of the habitat. And there we go, that's the rock wall done. I love the terrain you can see going up towards the rock wall, so I want to keep that. And what we're going to do is make it look much more realistic with the terrain paintbrush. So we'll cover the whole thing with the rough rock texture and then go into some of the smoother bits and cover that with the smooth rock texture. And then we're going to turn the intensity way down and paint little bits of dirt and grass in as well. And what we'll end up with is a really realistic looking piece of what looks like natural rock going up into the rock walls. Love how that looks. Let's get on to the little snow patch. What we're going to do is take the tops of some of that rock wall that we just created and make a fairly rough circle so that the snow has got somewhere to be put. So we'll move this round. I don't want it going up onto that hill there. We want a flat surface for this. So we'll just keep rearranging these rocks until we've got a roughly circular area where the keepers could place the snow. And having the rocks around means that the snow will, until it melts, stay in the area rather than sort of spreading out, because it needs to be nice and deep if they're going to be diving into it. Presumably the keepers would hide treats under the snow for the foxes to dive in and find. There we go, that's looking good. We'll just copy that and make the other side of the circle with it. We want a spare bit of space for them to get in with no rocks in the way, so it won't be a complete circle. Now in real life, if you put a decent amount of snow in, it's going to stay for quite a while, regardless of the heat. But not in Planet Zoo, so we need to hide a cooler under here. So we'll put that in and then we'll adjust the range so that it is just cooling the area where we're going to put the snow in. There we go, that looks about right. And then we can go in and actually paint in the snow. Thanks to our cooler, we can use the terrain paint for this. So we'll paint some snow in, we'll be on full intensity. And once we've got a nice patch of it, we'll change the brush size down to the smallest and just paint a few details in. Got a franchise masters on this if you don't know how to do this, but essentially it's just keyboard shortcuts. We'll paint some more snow in, and then we'll turn this into an actual pile by raising the terrain so the foxes have got somewhere to dive into. And there we go, that's the snow pile done. Let's move on and get some more enrichment in for the foxes. We're going to use the aquatic bedding platform for this. I think it's one of the most underrated pieces in the game. So good for any sort of wood style builds like this, like you often see in zoos. And it comes with these poles as well, which just fit perfectly and hold it up. I'm basing this on an Arctic fox habitat I saw at the Highland Wildlife Park in Scotland, which was really cute. and it's on 2 levels. So we've got this first platform here, and then we're just going to copy it and have another one slightly higher, and we'll put some ramps in so the foxes can get up here. And as usual, we'll put some enrichment items on here so that they've got a reason to come up here. Water bowls, a cardboard box, I think, maybe some food as well. We'll need to make sure the ramps are wide enough for the staff to get up as well. So we'll make them using these Australian plank pieces. Ended up making these twice as wide in the final build, I think, just to make sure that the keepers could get up there. But it just looks like a nice, realistic, fairly low budget climbing platform. We'll put another one in here so they can get up onto the second level, and then we can start planting up the habitat. We'll start off with some buffalo grass, sinking it down into the ground as always, and concentrating it around the margins of the habitats where the foxes are going to squish it down less, and it'll also be harder to get to in terms of cutting and things like that. This end here is where we're going to have a little house for the foxes as well, so they can get out of the sun when they want to. We'll put some different bushes and shrubs in as well. This path that you can just see in the background is the staff access for this habitat and for the cougar habitat next door. We'll do one final bit of terrain painting, and then it's time for the monorail. I hope you're sitting comfortably because it's story time. The San Bernardino Skyway opened in 1962 and was the first zoo monorail in the USA. Inspired by Disney World, by the end of the 1960s, zoos all over America had their own monorails. But over the years, they became less of a novelty and more expensive to run until by 2013, there were only 3 zoos in the US with monorails. The main issue was the company that manufactured them went out of business, so spare parts became impossible to source. And as we speak, there is only 1 zoo monorail left in the US at the Bronx Zoo. San Bernardino Zoo was no exception to this, and sadly the San Bernardino Skyway closed in 2013. What you can see here is me building the monorail track a few months ago, and viewer, I have a confession to make. I hate it. It completely ruins the look of the zoo. I'm so sorry if you were looking forward to it. I normally say we on this channel, but I am owning this one. This is entirely my fault. I should have been building this right from the start. It destroys all the sight lines we've so carefully constructed in this zoo, so unfortunately it had to go. But this does give us an opportunity to add some lore into the zoo. So I've been doing some work around the old monorail station, and this is what we have. I've left one piece of track coming out of the old monorail station, decorated as it was back in the monorail video, but with some new color schemes. I've hidden the beginning of the guest path with a little panda souvenir shop at the back entrance to the panda garden, put some signage on the trucks now that they're not moving, and we've got a little heritage sign outside the entrance showing what it used to look like back in its 1960s heyday. I've also prepared this little montage as an apology for the lack of monorail going forward, so you can see what it would have looked like when it was built. The monorail station will of course be staying. I love the station, and I love it when you see old buildings preserved in zoos, but the actual track won't be getting any bigger. And on that bombshell, let's get back to the build. Alright, time for some fences. So you can see in the background my first attempt at these, just a fairly basic mesh fence, but I wanted something more interesting, and I remembered a really cool fence that I saw at Zoo Leipzig, which had the new style of mesh that zoos have started to use, where the mesh only goes vertically. There's no mesh going across horizontally like normal or diagonally, and I'm going to try and make that here using the Grasslands pole. It's slightly thicker than it should be, but this is the thinnest metal piece in the game, so this is as thin as it's going to get. And we're just going to use this piece and connect it between these 2 pieces of wood here. And then I'm going to put a little thing on there just so we can measure it out, so we can make sure each piece of the mesh is the right length apart. I guess mesh isn't the right term for this actually, I think it's just wire, but I think this will give it a really interesting look. And we'll build one of these on a grid piece so it's nice and easy to move. Once we finish putting all the vertical wire in, we can delete those spacing pieces, and then we can just sink it down into the ground where we want it. And then we'll just put a fence post in on one side, delete the grid piece, and now we can just copy this around the habitat until we've got the fence in completely. It would be great if this new style of fencing was actually in the game, so we didn't have to make it ourselves and we could get the mesh a little bit thinner. But this is a decent approximation of it, and I've not used anything like this anywhere else in the zoo, so it gives it a really interesting look. We've got a lot of terrain changes happening on this path and all around this habitat. So the way I'm going to put it in is I'm making sure that the tops of the fence match up all the way along, and I'm not worried about the piece of wood at the bottom. We're going to go back in and edit that, so we can just select this on its own, and then just rotate this so that it follows the curve of the ground on each piece, and at the end we'll end up with a really natural looking fence that follows the ground's contours. If you look at the left hand side of the habitat where we are here, this is where we're going to build the little house for the Arctic foxes, and as you can see it is a really strange shape. So how are we going to deal with that? Well, what we're going to do is just build one piece of the building. So we'll build it again on a grid piece like the fence, and we use this wood from the Twilight pack and just start building up a wall. As we always do, we'll make sure each piece is rotated or flipped in respect to the one below it, so the texture isn't always the same and it looks nice and natural. Just checking the height. I want it to be high enough for the keeper to get in, but not so high that it looks ridiculous for the little foxes. We'll put a couple of larger pieces of wood at the top and the bottom, just to make it look nice. Get a bit of an overhang as well. Always good to have something that casts a shadow on your building, just makes it look more interesting. Lighting and shadows are so important. We'll get a simple corrugated roof on, and then line this one piece of building up with that fence. And now, because this one piece of building is the same width as the fence is, we can just take it and then move it along to the next fence and then rotate it so that it matches it. And then just make sure it joins up nicely with the piece that we've already got. So we'll slide this along here, make a few final adjustments, and we're going to get a really interestingly shaped building. Don't worry about all the flicker on the roof. That is what happens when you have grid pieces on top of each other. We're going to sort that out in a minute. We're going to put an Arctic piece in as well to cover up the gaps, make an adjustment to that fence so it fits in nicely, and then we'll just move each of these grid pieces either up or down just by 1 pixel, and that'll stop them from flickering, make the roof look good. And then it's on to the final thing that we're going to do in this build, which is some education. So I said when we started the Frozen North, I wanted to get more education and signage and things like that into this area of the zoo. So I found a really nice education piece in San Diego Zoo in their Arctic fox habitat. And we're going to recreate this here using some pieces from the Barnyard pack and a few other pieces. So we've got some new custom signs around the zoo with more detail on them than we normally do. We've got things like the polar bear trap and the custom food stands. And this is just another thing that's going to make this area feel more realistic and more unique and more like the things that you see in a modern zoo. So we've got a basic framework for this stand. This is going to be one of those things mainly designed for kids where you have a question on a piece of metal that flips up. So when the piece of metal is down, there's a question on it, and when you flip it up, the answer is revealed underneath. I'm using one of the smallest wood pieces in the game, sunk down into these pieces here to create the white area where the text and the photos would go. And then we're going to take some of the wall hooks from the conservation pack and use them to make the bits that flip up and down. So we'll sink one of these in, get it into the right position, and then we'll just copy it a few times. So we've got something wide enough that it could have a question written on it, something to do with the Arctic foxes for kids to guess the answer to. And then once we've got that in, we'll put some bolts so that it's got something to swing up and down on. This is just the smallest European hinge piece. And then we can just copy a few of these onto the surface and then place it down outside the habitat. We'll make sure it's low enough that kids can see it. And then we're going to do one final thing, which is to just put a little bit of a secondary barrier in here so the guests don't get too close to the fences. I'm using some of the temple rubble pieces here. I used to use this for pretty much every habitat I made in previous zoos, but we've been using the faux rocks to do this for a very long time now, so I thought we'd go a bit old school here. I really like how they look in front of this habitat. They're a lot more jagged than the faux rocks, and I think they suit this area really well. And that is the Arctic fox habitat done. Let's take a look at it. Here we go. I think it's a really cozy little corner, this. I'm pleased with how it's turned out. I think those new fences are pretty effective. And here's our little Arctic foxes. Really, they should both be in their summer coat, seeing as it's never really winter in California. But here we go. This little dude is going to do what he does. It's so cute. I'm going to try and breed some more dark or piebald ones, so we end up with a more realistic group of foxes, all in their summer coats permanently. But this is a nice start. And the guests get a really good view of the little snow patch as well. He's going to do it again. Can't stop diving into the snow. So yeah, I think eventually the white one will go back to the trade centre and we'll get more of a realistic family going on. Here's the education piece that we built. And that's the Arctic fox habitat. Here's where we were at the start of today. And at the top right, here is where we are now. This area is perilously close to being finished. We've just got 2 areas left now. And next week, we're going to be adding in something rather more ferocious than an Arctic fox. No time for a Franchise Masters in this episode. We had a lot to get through in regards to the monorail. Hope you can forgive me for its omission today. I will be answering another one of your questions next week. Let's go and take a look at the Explorers Club monolith. Thank you so much, as always, to everyone who has joined the Explorers Club. If you want to see your name on this monolith, then hit the join button on the channel or the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week for some more Planet Zoo.